To Mom's secure future, my son Daniel said, raising his champagne glass while the staff from Jefferson High applauded around me. And that was the exact moment my phone vibrated with a fraud alert from my bank. I remember smiling for the photo, the gold retirement banner hanging crooked behind me, a sheet cake melting slightly under the gymnasium lights, my colleagues clapping as if I had just crossed some triumphant finish line. 42 years of teaching American history, 38 of them in the same brick building on Maple Avenue. And this was supposed to be the day I exhaled. I had planned it carefully. I would retire at 68, sell the larger house within 5 years, downsize to something manageable, maybe finally visit Charleston in the spring when the azaleas were in bloom. Daniel had insisted on helping me streamline my finances 3 years earlier. Mom, you shouldn't be logging into accounts on public Wi-Fi, he'd said gently, sitting at my kitchen table while Olivia stood at the sink drying dishes, listening without appearing to listen. Let me consolidate everything. I'll make sure your pension and savings are protected. I had raised him to be responsible. He worked in financial consulting. He spoke in calm numbers and tidy projections. I handed him my login information because that's what mothers do when their sons offer protection. Back in the gymnasium, the applause faded into the background as I glanced down at my phone. The notification read, "Balance change, $0 available." I thought it was a glitch. Retirement days are emotional. Maybe I tapped the wrong account. I excused myself politely, saying I needed some air, and stepped into the hallway where the trophy cases reflected my smaller, older shape in the glass. I logged in again. Pension distribution account, $0. Supplemental savings, $0. I blinked slowly, the way I used to when a student turned in a paper so wrong I had to reread it twice. 0 is a clean number. Final. Not even a few hundred left behind by mistake. I checked the transaction history. Transfers. Multiple. Large. Over the past 18 months. Each one authorized through the online portal Daniel had set up for my convenience. My heart did not race. It simply tightened, like a fist closing around something fragile. I turned the thermostat down to 65 degrees last winter to save on heating. I cut my blood pressure pills in half some months when the copay felt steep. I told myself it was temporary, that once I retired I would finally feel secure. In the hallway, someone laughed inside the gym. I could hear Daniel's voice floating above the others, warm and proud. My phone buzzed again, this time not from the bank, but from social media. Daniel had checked in at the Bellagio in Las Vegas 3 hours earlier. The photo showed him in sunglasses, Olivia beside him, a caption that read, "Celebrating big milestones." I stared at the fountain behind them, the desert sky impossibly blue, the kind of blue we never see in Ohio. The timestamps aligned neatly with the final withdrawal from my pension account. I looked at my reflection in the dark glass of the trophy case. My silver hair was pinned carefully, my navy suit pressed for the occasion. I did not look like a woman who had just lost her life savings. I looked retired. I walked back into the gym, accepted another hug, another handshake, another paper card filled with kind words. Daniel kissed my cheek. "You did it, Mom," he said softly. "Now you can relax." I held his gaze for one steady second longer than usual and nodded. "Yes," I said. "Now I can." I did not mention the bank alert to anyone that afternoon. I drove home in my 12-year-old Buick, the retirement bouquet resting on the passenger seat, the card from the faculty balanced carefully on top, as if nothing in my life had shifted. The house felt the same when I unlocked the front door. The hallway smelled faintly of lemon cleaner. The clock above the stove ticked with patient rhythm. I set the flowers in water and placed my phone face down on the kitchen counter. For 3 years Daniel had reassured me that everything was organized. He had created a single dashboard where my teacher pension, my small investment account, and the savings from my late husband Robert's life insurance policy were displayed in neat columns. He had said the word secure more than once. Secure login. Secure transfer. Secure retirement. I remember the afternoon he first brought his laptop over. It was early fall, still warm enough that the ceiling fan hummed above us. He sat where Robert used to read the newspaper and walked me through what he called modernization. He explained that fraud targeted seniors and that he did not want me to become one of those cautionary stories on the evening news. Olivia stood nearby, leaning against the counter with her arms folded, nodding occasionally. She said very little but smiled in a way that felt supportive. I had felt proud that my son cared enough to step in. I signed the authorization forms allowing him limited access. Limited was the word he used. That evening after the retirement party, I turned my phone back over and studied the transaction history again. The earliest large transfer appeared 18 months ago. $25,000 moved to an external account. Then another $30,000 3 months later. Then smaller amounts, $5,000 here, $10,000 there, as steady as a metronome. I opened social media and scrolled through Daniel and Olivia's posts from the same months. A weekend in Scottsdale. A new patio set. A photograph of them at a rooftop restaurant in Chicago. The caption spoke about hard work paying off. I had believed they were finally thriving on their own. I had even slipped Daniel a birthday card with $200 inside last year, apologizing that I could not give more until retirement. The memory settled heavily in my chest. I walked to the thermostat and looked at the number 65 glowing softly. I had kept it there most nights to control the heating bill. I had told myself that temporary discomfort built discipline. I brewed a cup of decaffeinated coffee and sat at the kitchen table with a legal pad. Old habits returned. When something did not make sense, I made a timeline. Date of account consolidation. Date of first transfer. Date of second transfer. Date of Daniel's promotion announcement online. Patterns began to form, quiet but undeniable. At 9 o'clock, that evening my phone lit up with a message from Daniel. He wrote that the retirement party looked beautiful and that he was proud of me. He added a photo of the Las Vegas skyline outside his hotel window, lights shimmering against the desert night. He said they were celebrating a client milestone and would call me in the morning. I typed back a simple response. I wrote that I hoped he was enjoying himself and that we would talk soon. Then I placed the phone on the table and looked around the kitchen I had paid for inch by inch over decades. I did not cry. I did not raise my voice. I simply understood that before I could relax, as he had suggested, I would need to learn exactly where my secure future had gone. The next morning Daniel called at 9:15 exactly, cheerful in the way people are when sunlight and distance protect them from consequence. I let the phone ring twice before answering. He asked how it felt to wake up without an alarm clock, how it felt to finally be free. I told him the house was quiet and that I was making oatmeal, which was true. He described the view from his hotel suite at the Bellagio, how the fountains moved in perfect choreography, how the desert air felt lighter than Ohio humidity. He said he might extend the trip through the weekend because a potential client wanted to meet again. I listened carefully to the confidence in his voice. I imagined the external account number on my legal pad, the steady rhythm of transfers that had funded this view. I asked him a simple question. I asked whether all my accounts were still consolidated the way he had arranged them. There was a pause, small but measurable. He said of course they were, and reminded me that he monitored them regularly. He said I did not need to worry about a thing. I thanked him and told him I appreciated his help over the years. When the call ended, I did not sit down. I went to my desk in the living room and opened the metal file box where I kept original documents. Robert had always insisted on paper copies. Pension statements, insurance policies, the deed to the house. I found the authorization form I had signed granting Daniel access. The language stated limited financial management for convenience purposes. It did not authorize personal transfers into unrelated business ventures. I read the clause twice. Then I called the customer service number printed on the back of my pension statement. A recorded voice guided me through options until a representative named Carla answered. I confirmed my identity slowly and clearly. I asked her to review the transfer history on my account. She read the amounts and dates, matching exactly what I had written down. I asked whether those transfers had been initiated through my primary login or through a secondary authorized user. She explained that they were executed through an online profile created under my name, but linked to a separate email address for notifications. I recognized the address immediately. It belonged to Daniel. I thanked her and asked what steps were required to freeze the account from further movement. She placed me on hold for 3 minutes while soft instrumental music filled the line. During those 3 minutes, I looked around my living room at the framed photographs of Daniel at age 7 holding a Little League trophy, Daniel at 22 in his college cap and gown, Daniel at his wedding beside Olivia in a white lace dress under a summer sky. I had believed that education and love were permanent investments. Carla returned and explained that I could temporarily suspend online transfers pending a formal review. I authorized the freeze. She told me it would take effect immediately. I hung up and wrote the time in the corner of my legal pad. 10:43 in the morning. The fountain outside Daniel's hotel window would likely be dancing again soon for tourists gathering with cameras. I wondered if he would feel the shift when the next attempted transfer failed. I stood and walked to the front window of my house, watching a delivery truck move slowly down Maple Avenue. Retirement had begun less than 24 hours earlier. Security, I was learning, was not a gift handed to me in a toast. It was something I would have to reclaim, carefully and without raising my voice. At 11:12, that same morning my phone vibrated again, this time with a notification that an attempted transfer had been declined due to account restrictions. I did not need Carla to confirm who had initiated it. I pictured Daniel in his hotel room, perhaps still wearing the robe provided by management, refreshing his screen with mild confusion. A second notification followed 5 minutes later, another failed attempt, slightly smaller in amount. I sat at my kitchen table with my legal pad and wrote both times down carefully. Patterns reveal themselves when you give them space. At 11:23 my phone rang. Daniel's name appeared across the screen. I let it ring once, twice, 3 times before answering. His voice was lighter than it had been the night before. But there was an edge beneath it now. He asked whether I had changed any settings on the pension account. I said that I had spoken to the bank that morning to review my retirement details. I did not accuse him. I did not mention the declined transfers. I simply said that I preferred to manage my own accounts going forward. There was silence long enough for me to hear the faint hum of air conditioning through his line. He said he had only ever tried to help. He reminded me that financial markets were volatile and that timing was important. I agreed that timing was important. I told him that was exactly why I needed full clarity. He asked whether I trusted him. The question arrived gently, almost wounded. I looked at the photograph on my refrigerator of Daniel at age 10, missing his 2 front teeth and holding a report card with straight ass. Trust, I realized, had never been the issue. Documentation was. I said that trust and transparency worked best together. He exhaled slowly and said he would review everything when he returned from Las Vegas. I asked when that would be. He hesitated before saying Sunday evening. It was Thursday. After the call ended, I dialed a different number from the list I had kept for years but rarely used. It belonged to an attorney named Michael Harris who had helped Robert draft our wills 15 years earlier. His assistant scheduled me for an appointment the following afternoon. I gathered my files, including printed screenshots of the transfer history and the authorization form Daniel had prepared. The afternoon sun stretched across my hardwood floors as I organized the papers into a simple folder. I did not rush. I brewed tea instead of coffee and sat at the table where Daniel had once completed his homework while I graded essays. I remembered telling my students that primary sources mattered more than opinions. Bank statements were primary sources. Social media posts were context. Words spoken in celebration were not evidence. At 4:30 my phone lit up again with a new photograph from Olivia's account. She stood beside Daniel in front of the hotel lobby, dressed for dinner, captioned with a note about enjoying the rewards of dedication and smart planning. I studied her smile carefully. I wondered whether she knew the account had been frozen. I wondered whether she had ever logged into my pension herself or if she simply enjoyed the results. I placed the phone face down once more and folded my hands on the table. Retirement, I had been told, was about rest. I was beginning to understand that it was also about revision, not of my past, but of my boundaries. The desert lights of Las Vegas would continue to glow whether I watched them or not. What mattered now was the quiet house on Maple Avenue, and the file folder resting neatly beside my teacup, filled with dates, amounts, and signatures that told a clearer story than any toast ever could. On Friday afternoon, I sat across from Michael Harris in a modest office that smelled faintly of paper and coffee, the same office where Robert and I had once signed our wills with steady hands and hopeful assumptions. Michael had more gray in his hair now, but his voice remained measured and precise. I placed my folder on his desk and slid the documents toward him one by one. The authorization form, the transfer history, the printed screenshots of the declined transactions from the previous morning. He read quietly, occasionally adjusting his glasses, occasionally underlining a figure with his pen. When he finished, he leaned back and asked a single question. He asked whether I had ever explicitly granted my son permission to move funds into accounts outside my direct ownership. I told him no. I explained that the arrangement had been presented as consolidation and monitoring, not redirection. Michael nodded slowly and said that intent mattered, but documentation mattered more. He explained that because the transfers were initiated through my primary account, even if accessed by an authorized user, the situation would require careful handling. He recommended that I formally revoke Daniel's access in writing and request a complete audit trail from the financial institution, including the destination accounts and associated business names. He also suggested that I avoid confrontation until all records were secured. I appreciated that advice more than he realized. I had no desire to raise my voice in a hotel lobby or argue over the phone while desert fountains danced behind my son. I wanted clarity first. When I returned home, the house felt different, not smaller, but sharper, as if every object understood that it had been paid for with intention. I drafted a brief letter revoking Daniel's authorization, printed it, signed it, and scanned a copy to the bank's secure portal as instructed. I mailed the original by certified mail for record. The process felt calm, almost administrative, yet beneath it ran a current of realization that settled deeper with each step. Around 6 in the evening, Daniel sent another message. He wrote that he sensed tension in my voice earlier and asked if everything was all right. I replied that I had begun reviewing my retirement structure and that I would prefer to discuss details once he returned. He responded with a thumbs-up emoji and a reassurance that he would bring statements to explain how the funds had been invested temporarily for higher returns. The phrase higher returns lingered in my mind. I opened my laptop and searched public business records for Ohio and Nevada. Within minutes, I found a limited liability company registered 8 months earlier under the name Whitmore Strategic Holdings. The listed managing member was Olivia Whitmore. The registered address matched the one Daniel and Olivia used for their apartment. I did not need imagination to connect the timing of that registration with the pattern of transfers from my pension account. I printed the record and added it to my folder. Outside my kitchen window, the evening light softened the edges of Maple Avenue. A neighbor watered her lawn in steady arcs, unaware that anything in my world had shifted. Retirement had been described to me as a season of ease, but I was discovering that it was also a season of discernment. I had spent decades teaching young people how to analyze cause and effect, how to separate rhetoric from fact. Now I was applying the same discipline to my own family. Daniel would return on Sunday. He would expect conversation shaped by emotion. What he would receive instead was a table cleared of decoration, a folder organized by date, and a mother who had finally learned that security is not preserved by silence, but by boundaries drawn with steady hands. Daniel arrived Sunday evening just after 7:30, his car pulling into the driveway with a confidence that suggested nothing in his world had shifted. I watched from the living room window as he stepped out wearing sunglasses despite the fading light, his carry-on bag slung over his shoulder. Olivia remained in the passenger seat, scrolling through her phone, her face illuminated briefly before she glanced up at the house. I opened the front door before he could knock. He smiled and leaned forward to hug me, the scent of hotel soap and desert air still clinging faintly to his jacket. He asked how my first weekend of retirement had been. I told him it had been productive. We sat at the kitchen table where he had once done algebra homework, where I had signed the authorization form 3 years earlier. I placed the folder between us, but did not open it yet. Daniel began explaining without prompting. He spoke about strategic liquidity, about short-term positioning, about opportunities that required quick movement of capital. He said the funds had not been wasted, but leveraged. I listened without interruption. When he paused, I opened the folder and slid the printed business registration across the table. Whitmore Strategic Holdings. Registered managing member, Olivia Whitmore. Registered 8 months ago. His eyes moved over the page once, then again more slowly. He said it was a side venture, something they had hoped to surprise me with once returns stabilized. I asked whether my pension account had been used as seed capital. He said it was temporary. He said the plan was always to replenish it before my retirement date. I asked why the transfers continued into the week of my retirement ceremony. He did not answer immediately. Olivia stepped into the kitchen then, her heels clicking softly against the tile. She said they had calculated projected gains and believed the market would rebound faster. She said they did not want to burden me with details that might cause unnecessary worry. I folded my hands on the table and looked at both of them carefully. I explained that worry is different from consent. I told them I had revoked Daniel's authorization and requested a formal audit from the bank. I watched the realization settle across their faces not as panic, but as inconvenience. Daniel said legal action would only complicate matters and damage family trust. I reminded him that trust had required transparency from the beginning. He asked whether I believed he would intentionally harm me. I answered that intention does not erase consequence. The house felt very still then, the clock above the stove marking each second with patient precision. I informed them that until the audit was complete and a repayment structure documented in writing, I would not restore access to any account. I also explained that I had scheduled a follow-up meeting with my attorney to update my estate documents. Daniel leaned back in his chair, as if adjusting to a temperature change. Olivia crossed her arms, her expression carefully neutral. I did not raise my voice. I did not accuse. I simply stated facts supported by dates and signatures. When the conversation ended, Daniel stood and said they would review their options and provide a plan within the week. I walked them to the door. The evening air was cooler now, carrying the faint scent of cut grass from a neighbor's yard. As their car reversed down the driveway, I remained on the porch until the red tail lights disappeared at the corner. Retirement had introduced me to a version of my son I had not fully seen before, but it had also introduced him to a version of his mother he had underestimated, one who understood that love does not require silence and that dignity, once awakened, does not return quietly to sleep. 3 days passed without a plan. On Wednesday morning, an envelope arrived by certified mail addressed in Daniel's handwriting. I recognized the careful print from years of school permission slips and holiday cards. I carried it to the kitchen table and opened it with a letter opener Robert had once given me as a small anniversary gift. Inside was a typed proposal outlining what Daniel called a temporary liquidity strategy. He explained that the funds transferred from my pension had been invested into Whitmore Strategic Holdings to secure a commercial property opportunity in Nevada. He projected that within 12 to 18 months the property would appreciate and generate returns sufficient to restore my full balance with additional profit. He included spreadsheets filled with optimistic numbers and growth percentages. There was no acknowledgement that my retirement date had been fixed for years, no explanation for why consent had never been requested. At the bottom he had signed his name with a flourish that looked confident but rushed. I read every page slowly, then placed the documents beside the folder already thick with evidence. That afternoon Michael called to inform me that the bank had confirmed the destination accounts tied to the transfers. The primary receiving account was registered under the Nevada Limited Liability Company managed by Olivia. A secondary account listed Daniel as an authorized signatory. The pattern was clear and documented. Michael explained that while criminal proceedings were an option, a civil recovery approach might allow for restitution without escalating beyond repair. I appreciated the distinction. I had no desire to see my son punished in headlines. I wanted accountability measured in restored balances and redefined boundaries. On Thursday evening Daniel called again. His voice carried less certainty now, more calculation. He asked whether I had received the proposal. I said that I had. He asked whether I understood the potential upside. I told him I understood that retirement is not a speculative venture. He insisted that the investment would have succeeded if the market had not shifted unexpectedly. I asked whether he had prepared any written agreement guaranteeing repayment by a specific date regardless of market performance. There was a pause. He admitted they had not formalized such terms. I informed him that my attorney would draft a repayment agreement requiring scheduled deposits beginning within 30 days, secured by their personal assets if necessary. Silence followed, longer than before. He said that would put pressure on their business. I replied that retirement savings are not venture capital. The line grew very quiet then, as if both of us were measuring the distance that had formed. Olivia's voice came faintly through the background, asking what I had said. Daniel did not repeat my words. Instead, he asked whether I was threatening them. I answered carefully that I was protecting myself. There is a difference. After the call ended, I walked through the house, turning off lights one by one. The routine felt grounding. I paused in the hallway where family photographs lined the wall. Daniel at his high school graduation. Daniel at his wedding reception, smiling broadly as he danced with me under soft lights. I studied that photograph longer than the others. Love had never been absent. Judgment had been. The next morning I met with Michael again and authorized him to draft the formal repayment agreement along with an updated estate plan, removing Daniel as executor and primary beneficiary until full restitution was made. The pen felt steady in my hand as I signed. Retirement, I had once imagined, would begin with travel brochures and leisurely mornings. Instead, it had begun with contracts and recalibration. Yet beneath the disappointment, there was something steadier emerging, a quiet recognition that dignity does not erode when tested. It clarifies, and clarity, once achieved, changes every conversation that follows. The repayment agreement was delivered to Daniel and Olivia by courier the following Monday morning. I knew the exact time because Michael sent me a confirmation message at 9:22. The document was clear and measured, outlining the total amount transferred from my pension account, the accrued interest that would have been earned had those funds remained untouched, and a structured schedule requiring monthly payments beginning in 30 days. It also required that Whitmore Strategic Holdings provide formal documentation of its assets and liabilities, and that Daniel and Olivia sign personal guarantees securing the debt. There were no dramatic words in the agreement. No accusations. Only dates, figures, and signatures waiting to be placed. That evening Daniel called. He did not open with small talk. He said the terms were aggressive. I responded that the transfers had been aggressive. He said the monthly amount would strain their operations. I asked whether they had considered that my entire retirement had already been strained. Olivia joined the call on speakerphone. She explained that the commercial property in Nevada was under contract and that forcing liquidity now could cause them to lose their deposit. I told her calmly that my pension was not designed to function as a bridge loan. Silence followed, heavier than before. Daniel then asked whether I would truly proceed legally if they refused to sign. I answered that the audit trail already existed and that my responsibility now was to protect the remainder of my financial life. I did not threaten. I clarified. The following afternoon, Daniel arrived alone. He carried the agreement in a slim leather folder, his expression tighter than I had ever seen it. We sat again at the kitchen table. He placed the folder down and said they were willing to sign if one modification could be made. He requested a slight reduction in the monthly payment for the first 6 months to allow their business to stabilize. I considered the proposal carefully. Compromise is not weakness when structured correctly. I asked for documentation of their current revenue projections and outstanding debts. He hesitated, then admitted they had overestimated initial returns and underestimated operational costs. The property had not appreciated as expected. In fact, it required additional capital improvements to attract tenants. I listened without interruption. The truth, once spoken plainly, carries less weight than the fear of it. I told Daniel that I would consider a temporary adjustment if the agreement included automatic withdrawal authorization and collateral documentation on the Nevada property itself. His shoulders lowered slightly, as if the conversation had shifted from confrontation to negotiation. He signed the document with steady hands. I watched his signature form each letter deliberately. When he finished, he looked up and said he never intended to hurt me. I believed him in that limited way mothers sometimes do, understanding that harm can grow from ambition as easily as from malice. After he left, I placed the signed agreement in my file and locked it in the metal box in my desk. The first repayment was scheduled to transfer on the 1st of the following month. That night, I walked through my house with a different awareness. The walls felt less fragile. The clock above the stove ticked with the same rhythm, yet it no longer sounded like a countdown. Retirement was still new, still unfamiliar, but it was no longer undefined. Boundaries had been written in ink. Accountability had been formalized. And for the first time since the toast in the gymnasium, I allowed myself to sit quietly in the living room without reaching for my phone, understanding that security, once reclaimed, is not loud. It is steady. The first repayment arrived on the 1st of the month at exactly 8:03 in the morning. I know the time because I was standing at the kitchen sink rinsing a coffee cup when my phone vibrated gently against the counter. I dried my hands before picking it up. Deposit received. The amount matched the revised agreement precisely. There were no extra words attached to it. No message from Daniel explaining or justifying. Just a number moving quietly back toward where it should have remained all along. I stood there for a moment, listening to the hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of a lawn mower somewhere down Maple Avenue. The transfer did not restore everything. It did not erase the months of secrecy or the uneasy conversations at my kitchen table, but it marked something measurable. Accountability had begun. Over the next several weeks, the pattern continued. Each payment arrived on schedule. Michael confirmed that the collateral documentation for the Nevada property had been properly filed and recorded. Whitmore Strategic Holdings was now legally bound to the repayment terms, not by assumption, but by contract. Daniel called occasionally, his tone careful, sometimes almost formal. We spoke about practical matters. The payment schedule, market updates, weather in Ohio. We did not speak about Las Vegas or the toast at my retirement party. Some subjects fade not because they are forgotten, but because they have been understood. One afternoon, about 3 months after the agreement was signed, Daniel stopped by unexpectedly. He stood on the porch without sunglasses this time, looking less polished, more reflective. I invited him in. We sat in the living room instead of the kitchen. He said the Nevada property had finally secured a tenant and that steady income was beginning to flow. He admitted they had expanded too quickly and relied too heavily on capital that was not theirs to risk. He said ambition had felt like responsibility in his mind, as if multiplying my savings would prove his competence. I listened without interrupting. When he finished, I told him something simple. I said that security is not built on multiplication alone. It is built on permission. He nodded slowly. Before he left, he asked whether I still planned to travel to Charleston in the spring. The question surprised me. I told him I was considering it. The azaleas bloom whether markets rise or fall. After he drove away, I walked through my house with a quieter heart than I had felt in months. The metal file box remained locked in my desk, the signed agreement inside, a reminder not of betrayal alone, but of boundaries learned late and honored firmly. Retirement had not unfolded the way I imagined when colleagues clapped beneath the gold banner in the gymnasium. It had begun with an empty balance and a sun celebrating in the desert. Yet it had also revealed something steady within me that years of teaching had quietly prepared. I knew how to examine evidence. I knew how to revise a plan. I knew how to stand in a room without raising my voice and still be heard. My pension account was not yet fully restored, but it was moving in the right direction, line by line, month by month. And each deposit carried a silent acknowledgement that I was no longer a background signature on someone else's ambition. I was retired, yes, but I was also resolved. Secure, not because someone toasted my future, but because I chose to protect it myself.